In 2026, Lufthansa is supposed to finally receive its new flagship, the Boeing 777-9, the jet designed to revolutionize its long-haul fleet. But this isn't a celebration. It's a multi-billion-dollar story of survival. The now 6-year delay of this single aircraft has thrown Lufthansa's future into chaos, forcing it to fly aging jumbo jets it had planned to retire, costing millions with every passing month. In an industry where timing is everything, Lufthansa placed a massive bet on the future, and that future is painfully late. For most passengers, an airplane delay means waiting at the gate. For Lufthansa, this delay is measured in billions, reshaping its fleet, its strategy, and its very identity as an airline. The question is, how did it all go so wrong? And what is the German airline doing to survive the fallout? Before we dive deeper, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories on the biggest wins and failures in aviation. Back in the early 2010s, Lufthansa faced a huge challenge: modernizing its long-haul fleet. Its skies were filled with iconic yet incredibly thirsty four-engine giants like the Boeing 747-400 and the Airbus A340. These were legendary machines. Passengers loved the upper deck of the 747, and the A340's quiet cabins were beloved by frequent flyers. But sentiment doesn't pay the bills. In an era of high fuel prices and growing environmental scrutiny, the economics were becoming unsustainable. Airbus had introduced the A350, and Boeing was offering the 787 Dreamliner. Both were efficient but smaller, not really replacements for the capacity of a jumbo jet. Lufthansa, which relied heavily on dense premium heavy routes between Europe, Asia, and the US, needed something larger. That solution seemed to be Boeing's new 777X program, launched in 2013. At its heart was the 777-9, a plane that promised the capacity of a jumbo jet with the efficiency of a modern twin engine. On paper, it was perfect. It would carry up to 426 passengers, featured revolutionary carbon fiber wings with folding wingtips, the first ever on a commercial jet, and was powered by the largest jet engines ever built, the GE9X. Those engines promised a staggering 20% reduction in fuel burn compared to the aircraft it would replace. For Lufthansa, this was the cornerstone of its long-term strategy. The airline signed on as the launch customer for 20 jets, an order that has since grown to 27. This single aircraft wasn't just another airplane, it was meant to be the flagship, the new face of Lufthansa, replacing its aging 747-400s and simplifying a fleet that had grown fragmented. And Lufthansa went all in. Built around 777-9's original 2020 arrival was a brand new premium cabin concept called Allegris. This wasn't just a new business class seat, it was a total reimaging of the passenger experience. 7 different seat types in business class alone. The physical layout, the brand identity, and even the marketing strategy were all built around the 777-9's launch. To give you an idea of how ambitious this was, airlines rarely tailor an entire product line to a single aircraft type. Well, Lufthansa saw the 777-9 as so central to its identity that it essentially redesigned the passenger experience around it. It was a perfectly stacked deck with the 777-9 as the bottom card, and then that card started to wobble. The year 2020 came and went with no new airplane. The delivery date slipped to 2023, then 2025, and now the official target's 2026, a full 6 years late. This wasn't caused by one issue, but by a chain reaction of crises. First, the GE9X engines. They were a marvel of engineering, designed with massive fan blades and ceramic composites to achieve unheard-of efficiency. But the design proved too ambitious. Early testing revealed premature wear, forcing GE back to the drawing board. Years were lost solving the issue. Then came Boeing's own structural problems. In 2019, during an FAA stress test, a cargo door on the 777X test plane blew out. A serious structural failure raised questions about whether Boeing had underestimated loads on the new wing. But the real hurricane came from another Boeing jet, the 737 MAX. After 2 fatal crashes, the FAA overhauled how it certifies aircraft. Regulators were no longer willing to rely on Boeing's internal assessments. Every system on the 777X now faced microscopic scrutiny. What might have been a streamlined approval process stretched into years. And then COVID. The pandemic shattered supply chains. Factories shut down, suppliers couldn't deliver, and Boeing itself was crippled by labor shortages. Just as things stabilized, another blow landed in August 2024 when cracks were found in the engine mounting hardware, grounding the test fleet again. Add in repeated worker strikes at Boeing, and the schedule unraveled. For Lufthansa, the dream wasn't just slipping, it was becoming a strategic catastrophe. To put it in perspective, By the time Lufthansa actually receives its first 777-9, the airline will have waited longer than the gap between the Concorde's retirement and the Airbus A380's launch. In the modern aviation industry, that kind of delay is almost unheard of. And remember, Lufthansa isn't the only one waiting. Airlines like Emirates, Qatar Airways, and Singapore Airlines also bet heavily on the 777X. But Lufthansa is in a uniquely painful spot as the launch customer. Its branding, its new cabin, and its entire fleet plan were all tied more closely to this aircraft than anyone else. This cascade of delays has left Lufthansa in an incredibly tough spot, forcing them to make costly decisions just to keep their network running. It's a fascinating look at how the failure of one project can ripple across an entire industry. If you're finding this deep dive into airline strategy interesting, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next story. Boeing 777-9 deliveries delayed further. Lufthansa's CEO thinks so. For Lufthansa, the 777-9's absence isn't an inconvenience, it's a crisis. The most obvious impact is financial. Lufthansa is forced to keep flying older, less efficient aircraft like its A340s and 747-400s. These are four-engine gas guzzlers, burning 20 to 30% more fuel than the 777-9 would have. In today's world of tight margins and sky-high fuel costs, that is devastating. One CEO estimated aircraft delays are costing the Lufthansa Group up to 500 million euros every year. The pain doesn't stop at the fuel bill. On key routes, Lufthansa is now outmatched by rivals flying newer A350s and 787s. Take the route to Beijing, for example. Because Russian airspace is closed to European carriers, Lufthansa's older, less efficient jets had to fly long detours, making the route unprofitable. In 2023, Lufthansa canceled its Frankfurt-Beijing service entirely, handing market share to Chinese competitors. Then there's the product problem. The Allegris premium cabin was designed around the 777-9. With the plane missing, Lufthansa had to awkwardly retrofit it onto other jets like the A350 and 787. Those retrofits faced delays too. In one bizarre case, Lufthansa took early delivery of 787s with Allegris seats already installed, but most of the business class seats couldn't be sold because they weren't certified yet. Imagine paying for shiny new planes and then roping off the best seats. It was embarrassing for a brand that prides itself on precision and reliability. The reputational cost is harder to measure, but just as painful. For premium travelers choosing between Lufthansa and competitors like Qatar Airways and Singapore Airlines, a brand new cabin can be the deciding factor. Every year Allegris is delayed, Lufthansa risks losing high-paying passengers to rivals. And this matters deeply because Lufthansa is not just another airline, it's Europe's largest airline group, owner of Swiss, Austrian, and Brussels Airlines. A misstep at the flagship carrier doesn't just hurt Lufthansa itself, it weakens the entire group, creating ripple effects across Europe's aviation map. With its carefully planned fleet strategy blown apart, Lufthansa has been forced to improvise. The airline placed big orders for Airbus A350s to cover the gap. Ironically, it also bought more Boeing jets, but not the ones it wanted. Lufthansa snapped up several Boeing 787-9 Dreamliners, including so-called whitetails, jets originally built for other airlines that canceled their orders. Lufthansa had to take these aircrafts as is, sometimes with cabins designed for a completely different airline, just to get new planes in the air. But perhaps the most symbolic move was the return of the Airbus A380. Lufthansa had grounded the Super Jumbo during the pandemic with plans to retire it permanently. But with the 777-9 nowhere in sight, it had no choice but to reactivate several A380s. The A380 is expensive to operate and doesn't fit Lufthansa's long-term strategy, but it was the only way to add the capacity the 777-9 was supposed to cover. So today, Lufthansa's fleet is a patchwork: brand new 787s, aging A340s, revived A380s, upcoming A350s, and eventually the 777-9. What was meant to be a streamlined, cost-efficient plan has become a logistical headache. Different aircraft types mean higher costs for training, maintenance, and spare parts. It's the exact opposite of what Lufthansa's long-term strategy envisioned, and it highlights a larger trend in aviation. Airlines are increasingly forced into reactive fleet planning, juggling whatever aircraft they can get their hands on rather than executing carefully crafted strategies. Lufthansa is not alone here. British Airways, Emirates, and even United have all had to adjust fleet plans because of Boeing and Airbus delays. What do you think? Will hydrogen really take off, or is this just another aviation experiment? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like in this video if you've learned something new today. Lufthansa will get its Boeing 777-9s eventually. Boeing now confirms Lufthansa as the launch customer with its first delivery targeted for 2026. When it arrives, it'll be fantastically advanced aircraft, quiet, efficient, and spacious. But the dream's been tarnished. The 6-year delay has cost Lufthansa hundreds of millions, if not billions, in excess fuel burn and lost opportunity. It's forced a complete reactive overhaul of multi-billion-dollar fleet strategy and handed a competitive edge to its rivals. And even once the 777-9 does enter service, Lufthansa faces a new challenge, making sure passengers actually notice. By 2026, competitors will have years of head start operating next-generation cabins. Lufthansa's Allegris will no longer feel groundbreaking, it'll just feel like it's finally catching up. The story of Lufthansa and the 777-9 is a stark lesson for the entire industry. Tying an airline's future to a single, unproven aircraft is a monumental gamble. The delay has permanently reshaped Lufthansa's fleet, its brand, and its relationship with Boeing. And it makes you wonder, as manufacturers struggle with production delays, certification hurdles, and supply chain meltdowns, is chaotic, reactive fleet planning simply the new normal? Or will airlines return to bold, carefully orchestrated bets like Lufthansa's, knowing full well that sometimes the future doesn't arrive on time? Let me know what you think in the comments below.